Hi, everybody. Well, my tongue is yellow. I just had a golden milk. Please forgive that yellow tongue. Um, but today we're going to talk about the gift of loneliness, or how to make the most out of loneliness. So we're not supposed to be lonely. It's supposed to mean things are wrong. Some of what people think makes loneliness wrong is that it means something's wrong with you if you're alone. Because if you had lots of friends and relationships or a partner, then that's proof that nothing is wrong with you. So usually we see loneliness as something that is an indicator that something's wrong with you. But I want to just talk about like people who are alone on purpose, just to counter that myth a little bit. Every culture has hermits or magicians or wise men or wise women who choose to live outside of the culture. So it's kind of hard to say that there's something wrong. Well, actually, a lot of people think there is something wrong with those people. But the reality is those people are usually on a journey, or they have some important wisdom that they're attaining or practice that they're practicing. So it's not 100% true that being loneliness is an indicator that something is wrong. It's usually an indication that you're on a journey, or it can be. So I want to talk about a time when I was very lonely, because I know that a lot of women find themselves in this position. And it was after my divorce. And, you know, when you are blindsided by the end of a relationship, you can lose a lot all at once. Like your partner for sure, but also like if you had created a nuclear family and you had children. And a lot of women lose where they're living, their homes. So it's a lot. And in my case, and in the case of other women, you don't always have the support that you would love to have in a situation like this. I come from a family that is pretty fractured, and everyone in my family suffers from this, not just me. And I always felt a little bit jealous about people who had very close families that were very supportive. So I found myself during my separation and divorce without a real backup support network is the way to say it. And I was really alone. And I told myself that, after like a year, I'll just pick up where I left off with someone new and everything will be fine. But then a year came, and then 5 years came, and then 10 years came, and then 15 years came. And I was still alone. Now, I wasn't lonely that whole time, but I did experience loneliness very acutely. And one of the reasons that it feels, I think the main feeling for loneliness for me was sadness and frustration. I forgot where I was going with that, so let me check out my notes. So I thought I would just pick up, but instead I found myself alone, and I would feel this a lot on like Friday night, Saturday night, on the weekends. And I would tell myself, you know, something's wrong, I shouldn't be alone. And instead, I decided to question that, like, should I really be with someone? And is something wrong with me because I'm alone? And am I really lonely? And what I realized, and I think this is the first question to ask yourself when when you're telling yourself that you're lonely, is, you know, are you really lonely? And what I discovered was I was only actually lonely like 20% of the time, which is a pretty low percentage. And I had a lot of, I had the good grace to form a platonic friendship with a male friend of mine. And we would meet, we met pretty frequently. It kind of changed over the years, but we would meet and we would do this practice called the Work of Byron Katie. And having this male figure in my life work on personal growth and healing together, we would take turns helping each other. And him showing up right on time, exactly when we talked about showing up, made a huge difference. It was actually one of the closest, healthiest relationships I'd ever had. So the reality was, I was lonely, but it was only 20% of the time. So I had to check that confirmation bias. Like, I was looking at the fact that I wasn't in a partnership as me being lonely, and that wasn't completely true. I mean, I had nice interactions at work. There was a lot of communication with people to be grateful for. So the third thing that happened when I was lonely, which is really, really awesome, is that I decided, well, instead of telling myself I'm lonely on Friday and Saturday night and on the weekend, I'm going to have a relationship with myself. I am going to try to be to myself all of the things that I wanted my former husband to be to me. And what I soon realized is, wow, you are really high maintenance. Like, your expectations are really high. Like, I was having such a hard time meeting my own expectations when it came to a relationship, that it really opened my eyes, and I really had to decide, do I want to get super good at meeting all of these expectations, or do I want to adjust my expectations? And basically, a little bit of both of these things happened. So, so that was the third gift of loneliness. The fourth gift was questioning cultural taboos. So in our culture, you know, there's a lot of information like living alone, you have like a higher risk of being sick, or a higher risk of certain diseases, and also your lifespan is shorter. And I used to, like, when I was, on a Saturday night feeling sorry for myself, these are the things that would run through my mind, these kind of ideas like, I'm affecting my own quality of life by not being in a relationship. But what I realized is that being in a relationship full of drama, no one really, there are studies about this, but it doesn't get talked about as much, is really harmful to your health. It can certainly do as much damage as living by yourself. So these ideas that kind of circulate culturally, we have to take them apart and ask ourselves, like, does this mean like you should just throw yourself into a relationship and everything will be fine? Or, can you live alone happily and enjoy it while you have it, because you never know when you'll meet someone, and then, you'll no longer have that status of living alone. So I really learned to question that, and I encourage you to do that too. Just to really notice, like, am I believing the hype, or am I really happy or unhappy? And if I'm unhappy, like, what's the percentage? Is it like a lot or a little? Is it during certain times? That can really help. And then the other part of like the fear of being lonely is that you'll die alone, or when you're in a very like a vulnerable circumstance, like you get very sick or something happens, that you won't have someone to come and help you. And this is what I experienced, like I said, after my divorce. And I think that belief is based on, our past as human beings. Our literal safety did depend on if we were part of a group, that helped us to avoid getting eaten by a tiger. But we are modern people, and, it's, you can't actually walk very far without running into someone. And if you need help, 9 times out of 10, if you're in need, a person will be more than willing to help you. But what if there isn't anybody around? Well, this actually happened to me. It's happened to me several times. One time, the first time that made a huge impression on me is right out of my divorce, I was working at a preschool, and there are some serious diseases and illnesses that circulate in that environment. And I wasn't used to being around a bunch of little kids who got sick and took a lot of antibiotics. Like, my system wasn't used to it. And one day, toward the end of the day, I started feeling really tired, and I went home. And then the next thing I knew, I had this full-blown fever. And it was a pretty high fever. And I didn't have what I needed to really take care of it. I was going to go to the store that day and stock up on food, and I just couldn't do it. Like, I just went home, and whenever you get a high fever, you don't always think clearly. So I didn't think like to call an ambulance or call a friend or anything like that. I just all I could focus on was how bad I felt. So this is the moment. These are the moments we all fear. This is the circumstance that we fear. This is the story we tell ourselves about why we don't want to be alone, because something like this will happen. But the story turned out to have a really interesting twist. And that is that the next morning I woke up and I still didn't feel well enough to take any kind of action. And I just kind of like got up 2 or 3 times during the day to like drink fluids and go to the bathroom and lay down. And that night I started to feel very sorry for myself and kind of like confirm all my worst fears and start thinking, oh, Susan, you're gonna die here in this apartment all alone. And I think I had like a moment of clarity where I was like, okay, if this is how it's gonna end, then this is how it will end. If you are like, you know, if this is really going to happen right now, how can you be at peace with it? Like, what's the worst thing about it? And as I was kind of in my delirium, I just realized that I had always tried my absolute best with what I had been given to, you know, to live my life. And I had regrets. There were certainly things that I would love to have done differently. But the bottom line for me was that I could really see in that moment how hard I tried to grow and change and to improve my integrity and my ability to reason and be logical, but also to be a compassionate and feeling person. And as soon as I processed that, it might make me tear up a little bit, I was just flooded with peace. And I fell asleep. And the next morning I woke up and I felt good enough to walk 2 blocks to the store and get some stuff and then come back. And then I nursed myself back to health. And the big takeaway from this is that I really got to experience on a level of knowing, not just theory, but on a level of knowing that the universe really has your back. It really does. And I believe that was like in 2009 or 10. And ever since then, I have been confronted with situations that have proven this true over and over again. So what I want to emphasize here and recommend is that loneliness doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It could mean that you're on a very important journey. And it can show you so many things about how you think, what you have believed without questioning it, how you feel, and how to have a good relationship with yourself. And, you know, how the universe has your back. And I can't think of anything better as an outcome for loneliness is the confidence and the discernment that you get going through it. It really makes you confident and courageous. You know, after going through that, you can't just be in a relationship just by default. You can't, and you're not, you're okay with it, you're fine with it because you have a relationship with yourself and you've learned how to look out for your own best interests. So loneliness really can leverage your courage, leverage your confidence, and get you very clear on what kind of a relationship you want to have. And once you're clear on that with yourself, then it's so much easier with other people because you start to realize, oh, I can't ask myself to do this many things in one day without being getting overwhelmed or overly tired. I can't expect myself to do this kind of stuff, and I really need to do something nice and lovely for myself. These kind of things that we talk about a lot, these self-care things, they become very integrated and they become very second nature. So I am certainly grateful for my experience with loneliness and all that it's taught me and how it's helped me grow. So if you are lonely, I really encourage you to look at this as a great opportunity that you're being given or offered that can really up-level your quality of life and relationships. So that's all I have this week. I just want to let everybody know that this podcast this video log is brought to you by the Emotional Intelligence School, where we help you design and create your own happily ever after and tap into the wisdom of your emotions to help you create that design and bring it to life and actually live it. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Thursday at 5 p.m. Hawaii time. Aloha.